passionne. Ça sent réel.
Did two men with a trunk get off here by any chance?
Oui?
Which way did they go?
That way, monsieur.
Oh, where are we anyway?
Guise. France. Let me help you, monsieur. There is a taxi at front, and a hotel nearby in Rennes-le-Château.
Appreciate it.
Alright, so we are playing Gabriel Knight 3. This is the commentary version. The video is sped up because the original gameplay is almost 16 hours. And I'm fairly certain that no one wants to hear me talk for 16 hours. I can barely stand hearing myself talk for a couple of minutes. But when you do a commentary video, unfortunately you just have to hear yourself talk. Now, one of the things that I did with Gabriel Knight 3, you'll see it kind of like what I did here with the wallet. There's a lot of post-editing when I uploaded the video. So, for example, when this game came out was obviously quite some time ago, and like the resolution typically that the game was played at was 640 by 480. What I did is I wanted to play it at its highest definition, which was 1920 by 1080. However, that created a few problems, namely, we'll get to it eventually. When you use Sydney, the screen, the way that the computer is drawn, Sydney is a computer, the way it's drawn is misaligned. So you have like part of the monitor to the left, part of the monitor's up in the upper right hand corner, and all these different things that basically make using it at that resolution impossible. So I basically had one shortcut that would run it in 1920 by 1080 for Gabriel Knight 3, and then anytime I had to use Sydney, I had to basically save, exit, run the second shortcut that would run it at 640 by 480, which would allow me to use the Sydney computer. So what then I had to do then was basically when I was splicing this all together, I would have to basically resize the 640 by 480 into a 1920 resolution, which thankfully it didn't distort too badly. It just kind of looks like it stretches some of the letters in Sydney, but it's not bad at all. But what I also did is a number of times when I was looking at a inventory item, I would actually zoom in post, not in the game itself, but in the post edit, I would zoom in closely like I did with the wallet earlier to get a good look at it in terms of the game, because otherwise it was really, really small. And also, there's a number of cutscenes in the game that are also at like 320 by 200. So found all those files, basically extracted them and put them at a higher resolution, which was 1920 as well. And there's a few scenes, especially where it's the time passes, like at the very beginning. It starts off at, I believe it's at 10 a.m. to 12. And those were also like by 320 by 200. So I took that post edit and enlarged it as well. I think I got most of them. I think there's a few that slipped by post edit that I forgot to resize. But overall, I spent a lot of time basically in 1920, save, exit, back into 640 by 480 every time I had to use Sydney, post edit, resizing the screen to get a larger view of stuff. So I really enjoyed playing Gabriel Knight 3. I always forget how good this game is, except for the portion with Sydney. And the Sydney thing, it's not because I had to keep switching back and forth between the 1920, save, exit, go to 640, do whatever I need to do in Sydney, save, go back to 1920, load that game. But it was mostly because the Sydney stuff, if you were not paying a lot of attention to some of the clues that are being given as essentially Grace, who will come into the game a little bit later, as she's doing stuff on Sydney, some of that stuff was, I don't want to say it was difficult, because if you are really, really, really paying attention, you could get it. But a lot of times I felt like it was very, for me, like obviously Grace as the character knew what she was doing. But me as a player, I'm clearly not as smart as Grace by any means. And so there were times where I was trying, there's a part where you have to do a circle and you have to fill it in with a shape. And I was doing different shapes, trying it different things. And I eventually got it. But like I put in a shape and it didn't do anything. So I took the shape, made it bigger, smaller, took, resized it inside, slowly started spinning it. And in hindsight, if you look at it, it all makes sense. Because you're looking at the various clues and you're like, oh, I see, it's supposed to be this. But a lot of that was post the clue being discovered. Anyway, so we start the game where, as I said, we're at the beginning of day one, and it is no shock that, as I said, Grace will be coming into the game a little bit later. But the gentleman right there reading the newspaper is none other than our good friend Gabe's good friend, Mosley, who we know from Gabriel Knight 1, he was a police officer. And what's cool is Mosley has a secret that you will find out later on in the game. He says he's here basically to check out the treasure and stuff, and he's a part of the tour group, but there is more to Mosley's story for sure. And just like all the other Gabriel Knight games, I think part of the reason why my gameplay was 16 hours is, just like the other ones, I didn't use a walkthrough, and that will be painfully obvious when I'm using the Sydney thing. So a lot of times when something happens, like some part of the story triggers forward, I would literally go back to all the other scenes, or all the other areas, and I would look to see if anything there has changed as well. So Gabriel Knight really determines, just like the other ones in Gabriel Knight 2, basically any, even Gabriel Knight 1, and a lot of Sierra games, where once you've done something, it'll trigger something else to happen somewhere else. And so you kind of need to go to all those areas and check it out. Now, one of the things that was interesting in Gabriel Knight 3, if you watch the normal gameplay, you'll see it. The sped up version might be a little more difficult because it's moving really fast. But Gabriel Knight 3 had what I call, I don't know what the correct term is, but I call it a free roaming camera. So you would have Gabe and you can literally push the camera around anywhere that was within that area before, loads into another screen. But you can basically have Gabe stand right outside Rennes-le-Château and move the camera around, so you can move it over to the fountain, you move it over to the bookstore, and then like if you right click on the bookstore and tell him to open the door, he'll move instantly from that door to that location. Now what was cool, I didn't think about it at first, but later on I actually position the camera in certain areas and will click on something to know that Gabe is going to pass through the camera at a certain angle and kind of give a cool, very, very like movie-like feel, because I was setting shots up eventually later. In the beginning, I was just clicking everything and trying to remember what I could from Gabriel Knight 3. That's an example where I was just talking about the free moving cameras. You could see that he was standing over by the van, but by clicking on that window telling him to look, he suddenly moved instantly to that location versus walking all the way around, coming slowly over. He just instantly moved to this location. And what's kind of cool is if you look, that picture right there is none other than Jane Jensen, who is the writer and creator of the Gabriel Knight series. So I thought that was kind of cool that they put a picture of her in the game. That was a nice move. So here's all the mopeds. Right now it is closed because the tour has not started. So a lot of this in the beginning is just kind of like walking around and checking out different areas of where Gabe can go, what he can see, what he can interact with. And so this place is private property. Sorry if you can hear my corgi barking in the background. So that area, the house, was private property, so you can't get to it, but eventually you will. Something will trigger, and you'll go there. And so over there you can see the entrance, and what you can do is push the camera around, and you can see, whoops. This is one of the weird quirks with pushing the camera, where sometimes the angle can get kind of difficult to push the camera to where you need to go. And that happens later on when I'm trying to get to a cat. And if you've played Gabriel Knight 3, you know about the cat mustache. I had difficulty, trying to remember where this cat was, because it is off the beaten path within Rennes-le-Château. And so if you don't walk by this cat and see it, you really don't know to do anything about it. And like I said, how you get to this cat is not somewhere where you're commonly walking by. So it would have been better if the cat was near the fountain, near this chicken that you see walking around, like stalking the chicken or whatever, but it's not. So you can see here's the church. Now, before we walked up to the door, there was a path to the right. And what you have to do is basically camera push your path, or camera push the camera all the way down that right path, turn left, camera push all the way down, and then click Gabriel to move, and then he'll go into a different area, which is essentially this random dead end with a few doors and a cat, and that's where the cat is at. But getting to that cat is, like I said, it was definitely a pain. And one of the things you want to do, definitely in any Sierra game really, but especially Gabriel Knight, because Jane Jensen does so much to add detail and story, is you want to look at everything, because it's all going to pretty much give you a clue. And the amount of detail that went into Gabriel Knight 3 is rather amazing, because all of these photos, all of these statues, they all have a comment to them. And even some of them have a story saying, hey, that's a picture of so-and-so and so-and-so when this happened. This is a picture of so-and-so and so-and-so when this happened. I mean, this game really puts you in that area. So it's always good to look at everything and really get a feel for how much detail and story is in Gabriel Knight 3. So this is one of the things that I thought I couldn't figure out, and I know there's something to it because there is that red dot on the picture of the 4 angels, and there's something that comes up later, excuse me, with Grace, in terms of that angel, or the 4 angels, and something to do with their hand, but I could never figure it out. I've not looked at a walkthrough yet to see how it's done, but I am positive there's something to it because that red dot is there. And I'm sure you probably have to click in a certain pattern to make the dots work in a certain way. But I did not figure that out. Also, that grave right there with the sign, I never found out what was more to it. I'm sure I missed it somewhere in the story, but that seems like a significant gravesite. So here's that random alleyway that you need to move down, and it's even pushing the camera, it's very difficult to get down that alleyway. So it seems like I couldn't even get to it, as a matter of fact. So if we go over here, there's a museum. I was going to talk about that earlier. One of the odd things is sometimes when you click to view in something, and if you just pan away from it rather than click the magnifying glass to go out, the camera does get stuck in that view. So there's a few times where, like, I was looking at the museum sign and I just pulled the camera away rather than click the magnifying glass to zoom out. And the camera does get stuck in that view. And naturally, everyone you come across, I love this dialogue tree. The way it works is you just click on them and it has an icon. If you hover over the icon, it tells you what it's going to ask about. You want to talk to everyone and ask them about everything that you can. I cannot emphasize like how much story Jane Jensen put into this. And she did so much research that it feels very real. Like this could be a real thing. So it's an incredible amount of work. And she does that with all of them. I mean, okay, there's a part where something to do with vampires and stuff like that. And they're not the traditional vampires of fly and turn into bats and in daylight they burn. But obviously that part seems a little far-fetched. Now the one thing, there is that hat that was in the bin, and when Gabe tries to look at it, he says, "Oh, it's not my hat or whatever." That's misleading because eventually, after a series of other events, Gabe will come back, and that hat will actually be available to pick up. So that's that's like not misleading. That's just kind of tough because you would think, "Oh, I clicked on the hat. I don't need it. I can't pick it up." When in actuality, you will actually need it later. It's just a few other things need to happen first. So that was a tough one, and I probably only remembered because I recall that Gabe essentially needs to disguise himself. But for someone else who might be playing Gabriel Knight 3 for the first time, they just might think, "Oh, I can't get that hat, so no need to come back for it. So I don't know how to complete this disguise." It might have been better that the hat become, if you look in there prior to that disguise being available, that it's empty. And then when the disguise option becomes available, if you come back here, now there's a hat. So that way it doesn't kind of throw off players that they don't need it. And like I said, I went through everything and I was clicking everything to get the maximum amount of story out of the game. And the problem is if you play Gabriel Knight like nonstop, like from start to finish, try to do it probably within like a day or two. It's probably way easier to retain everything. But my playthrough of Gabriel Knight was probably over the course of 2 weeks. So there were times where I would read something or I'd see something, like I might see this sign here with the circle and the triangle in it. And later on, that is significant, but however, it was like 6 days ago that I played it, and I don't remember the significance of that symbol and stuff like that. So that is one thing that is difficult about Gabriel Knight 3, is it does have so much story and so much information that if you are playing it over the course of many, many days, it is easy to forget some of the things that you've read or some of the things that you've seen that later on become significant, especially when you're using the computer Sydney. The characters, such as these two, in Gabriel Knight 3, I mean, these are some of the, it's hard to say, because in Gabriel Knight 1, there was a bunch of great characters. I mean, Mosley and Grace aside, because they're such main characters, Gabriel Knight 1 had a lot of good characters. But overall, character-wise, Gabriel Knight 1 is the weakest. Gabriel Knight 2 introduced a bunch of great characters. Oh, so there's one that I missed to increase the size. Gabriel Knight 2 introduces a bunch of great characters. They're really well done. The actors are amazing. But I think the characters in Gabriel Knight 3 are actually very, very fun. They're all very different. They're all very quirky. They all definitely stand out as their own. And including this guy, Jean. They're all so well done. And it's clear that Jean here may enjoy the company of men in terms of how he reacts to Gabriel versus how he reacts to Grace. He seems more rude to Grace, and every time Gabriel says something, he's always like, "Oh, you're so nice." And this is Wilkes, and I already forgot her name, but she's the tour guide, the redhead, whom Gabe naturally flirts with. Wilkes is the he's a little bit of a drunkard and kind of chauvinistic, if you will, especially later on with Grace. But it's, I won't say it now, but good old Wilkes, something happens. And here you can see, as you come upstairs, that these two have switched rooms. And you'll find out why. I love that. The older woman makes the blonde do everything. But you'll find out that why he needs that room. And then when you go downstairs and look at the book, it'll note that the rooms have been swapped in there as well. So now that we see that something's happened where they've changed rooms, now it's, once again, you can go around, kind of look at everything, see if anything has changed or become available. Because as I said, we did see the time also change from 12 to 2. So as you can see in the church, there's now more people, more conversations to overhear. And at Gabriel Knight 3, I do know that certain things will trigger. So like, for example, hearing these two may open up something else, but if you go into a different order, you could potentially miss other stuff. So I know for certain, also because of my score at the end, there's a lot of what I missed. Even though I finished the game, I think I was somewhere like 40 points off. So there are definitely things that I missed in this game. One of them is probably that 4-angel thing that's right there. So there's clearly more I could have done and probably more I could have seen that because I didn't go in a specific order, I missed it. In that regard, it's kind of like the Lorbo Colonel's Bequest, where depending on where you move, you could see certain events. Unlike Colonel's Bequest, I didn't save and then try different areas. Each time it moved forward, I just let the game go through because I knew this was a much longer game than Colonel's Bequest, and no one wants to watch like over 24 hours of Gabriel Knight 3. And so when you talk to him, you can get a lot of information about the church from him, but he, you will discover, also has a secret. And we'll get to that later. So you can ask him about the church, the Templars, the treasure, all that stuff, and he'll give his opinion about it all. And you'll notice that there's only one set of pamphlets here. when Gabe looks at it, it's in French, and Gabe's like, I don't know French. And so later on, you'll find out. See, here's where you find out it's only in French. He says, I ran out of the American one, pretty much because of the tour group. I'll go ahead and reprint it and get some more out here. They become available, if I remember correctly, when Grace comes around. And you can see, because I found more information from the pastor or the priest, I can now go to other people and ask them about some of the information that I've just learned as Gabriel. So anytime you kind of learn something, kind of go back around to the other people and see if they have anything to add to the conversation that you've just now discovered. And then you can go over here and visit Mosley, and you can try to get more information from Mosley as to why he's really here. And so he'll pretty much say, hey, I'm just here part of the tour group. And you ask him different questions about the treasure that supposedly exists, that they're all out there to look for, pretty much. I can't recall who does Mosley's voice. Talk about that in a second. In this, but he does a good job of sounding sort of like the Mosley from Gabriel Knight 1, who was portrayed by Mark Hamill, who's probably most known for Star Wars and being the voice of the Joker. So I don't know who they got for Gabriel Knight 3, but I'm pretty sure it was not Mark Hamill, because he does indeed sound different. But Tim Curry did return. He had originally done the voice in Gabriel Knight 1 as Gabriel, and he returned for Gabriel Knight 3. And I think that's pretty cool. He must have really enjoyed doing the Gabriel Knight series, because it's Tim Curry. Like, the dude is famous for everything. He's got so much on his book, and he is one of the actors of one of my favorite movies, which is none other than the movie Clue. I watch Clue probably on a monthly basis, quite a few times. I love Clue, but he's done so much more. Obviously, he's Monty Python stuff, all of that stuff. He's got a long history of movies and everything that he's done. So it was cool. I don't know if Sierra paid him a bunch of money to come back and do it, or if obviously they paid him, or if he was just willing to come back at whatever the normal pay is to voice the lines of Gabriel Knight, because he actually enjoyed doing it. It's getting him back to do this when we couldn't have Eric. Oh my gosh, I'm totally forgetting his last name. I want to say Dean Erickson. Sorry, Dean Erickson. If we couldn't have him, as a FMV, or even it would have been fine if we couldn't get Tim Curry, to get Dean Erickson to voice Gabriel Knight in this one, because then at least that would have still been the progression of at least the same voice actor versus getting a third and different voice actor for Gabe. So the fact that they did manage to get Tim Curry is freaking amazing, and either speaks to how much they paid him or how much he enjoyed doing this originally. These two, probably from the people that Gabe encounters, these two may be some of my favorites, just because of their interaction between each other. And the woman in the purple hat is hilarious in terms of how she talks about people. You can tell she definitely comes from money and is a little bit snooty.